Welcome to Let's Talk Cardano, presented by the Cardano Foundation. In each episode, we delve deep into the transformative world of blockchain technology. Join us as we explore how blockchain is reshaping industries from finance to supply chain and talk with some of the key pioneers at the forefront of this revolution. All right here on Let's Talk Cardano.
This episode of Let's Talk Cardano welcomes Thomas Mayfield and Jeremy Firster from the Cardano Foundation as they discuss Veridian, an innovative solution using the Cardano blockchain and KERI protocol to transform digital identity.
Welcome to Let's Talk Cardano. My name is Jeremy Firster and I am the Global Enterprise Adoption Lead at Cardano Foundation. And today, I'm here with Thomas Mayfield, the head of decentralized trust and identity solutions at Cardano Foundation. Thomas, how are you?
Jeremy, I'm fantastic. How are you? Great to see you again.
Yeah, I'm doing just fine. I'm really excited today to have a discussion with you on the role of digital identity and the rising tide of KERI ACDC as a standard. Before we start, can we zoom out and can you first share with us the critical issues that are, facing the digital identity landscape today?
Absolutely. And I think that's a fantastic place to start, Jeremy. And we could even zoom out one step further, I suppose, and say it's not just digital identity, it's actually the internet and the way we're using it today. And of course, digital identity works atop of the internet, but we're living in an age where digital trust is collapsing. Almost daily, we're seeing significant increases in data breaches, a growing number of compromised data for users, businesses, and astronomical money going into either rectify or attempt to rectify the reputational damage that occurs from these breaches. And one of the most significant portions to how these breaches take place today, whether ransomware attacks, or traditional kind of key compromise attacks, is the digital identity. The access and authentication control layers are outdated. They aren't designed to provide the necessary foundation that the internet requires today. If we remember, the internet was never built with security and identity in mind. It was designed to be an efficient information sharing network, but they didn't foresee how ubiquitous the internet would become and how significant security and identity would play a role in our systems today. So this is why we are where we are with digital identity. Many different systems, protocols, fragmented across regions, and no real interoperability, and a serious lack of control of those identities. The majority of solutions are centralized, and the majority of solutions don't allow you to have complex identity relationships. And we'll talk a bit more about those cryptographics later on, I would assume. But we need to design systems, and especially digital identity, that is ready for our time now and for the future ahead. And I think we'll drill a bit more into that as we get on in our conversation.
Right. And also the users of the internet are evolving. It's no longer just APIs and human interactions. We're now looking into IoT, AI agents, a landscape of new risks associated to that.
I mean, you've touched on something there, Jeremy, that is fundamental also to the problem I mentioned before. I mean, if you can remember, maybe 5 years ago, perhaps not as long, it was a somewhat fun experience reading these various emails you would receive from your long distant cousin who had 100,000 tons of gold to send you, or a fraudulent email sent to you representing perhaps the CEO of your company or a distant family member. And it was very easy to tell that, this is a malicious email. This is not authentic. But the advent of AI has not just made certain workflows autonomous and allowed for, enterprises to provide 24/7 support without having to employ individuals to operate these support channels, but it's also made attack vectors much more trivial. And you now read very well written, extremely concise, phishing and malicious emails to this date, and it's only increasing the attack vectors when it comes to these types of attack we're talking about. So AI is an ally, but it is also being used as a weapon.
So switching gears, in Cardano Foundation, our core focus has been on developing enterprise applications and looking at this intersection of Web3 technology and the Web2 industry. And back in 2022, you and I worked together on a pilot for US Customs Declaration as a Web3 application. We've done supply chain traceability. We've looked at the role of physical products and digital twins and understanding how we can implement digital identity as part of that application. So through this journey of looking at the Web3 environment, how has that impacted Veridian and its choices that it's made for digital identity?
Jeremy, another great question. You're on a roll. I think the reality here is we've learned a lot in the last 3 years, especially when it comes to digital identity. And one of the realities that exist today, many decentralized identity solutions are reliant on a blockchain to operate. And they may work fantastically for their use case, but they are siloed into that specific network in the same way many centralized systems are siloed into a service provider or a platform. What we've learned is if we want to increase enterprise adoption, if we want to have credibility behind the identity solutions we're using, what we should really look to is industry and find already proven technologies and first start there before trying to reinvent the wheel or build in a brand new identity standard. When we took this journey 3 years ago and some of these platforms and applications that you mentioned before that we were building, we adopted what was available at the time. And because something was decentralized, we thought, well, this is much more ideal. The reality is you need an identifier that can have a root of trust that is well established and is interoperable between ecosystems. And I don't just mean between company A and company B. I also mean between technologies, between Web 2 and Web 3. And that is why we have arrived where we are today with the Veridian platform. And the protocol that we are using started in the traditional financial industry. In fact, it was a byproduct or a response to the financial crash in 2008. And what we are leveraging today is an identifier and a verifiable data protocol, and we'll get into those a little bit later on, I'm sure. We are using an identity protocol and a verifiable data protocol that allows you to leverage what is already being used in industry today. These highly regulated industries, whereby the identity is not only relevant to an organization, but also the financial transactions taking place between institutions. So when we found this identity protocol, which is KERI, Key Event Receipt Infrastructure, being leveraged in industry, and then we discovered that this is actually a decentralized public key management system, and it was agnostic to networks, we delved even deeper into understanding, is there a way we could leverage this identity? And then we discovered that not only is it cryptographically robust, but it also allows you to create complex identity relationships, like I mentioned before, multi-signature, weighted, custom threshold identifiers. And it also had something called a key event log. Now, please pull me back if I start going too deep and technical here, but very simply speaking, with KERI, each identifier has a key event log. And what this does is it lists every single controlling key pair that has ever been involved with the identifier, controlling the identifier. And it also tells you any piece of verifiable data, commonly referred to as verifiable credentials, that have ever been associated with that identity or revoked from it. And that key event log really spoke to us because it is a hash-chained data structure, independent to every identifier. What you have with KERI is you are carrying around with you your own blockchain structure for every event that has happened with that identifier. And that's what we found most appealing. And our work has been understanding this protocol and technology and finding ways to interrupt this technology into Web3, into the Cardano blockchain, and ultimately across as many networks that wish to adopt it.
Yeah, the key event logs, that sounds very similar in the blockchain realm for looking at a tamper-proof record of transaction history and tracing things back to its origin. But when we're speaking now on to identity, how does this key event log, what is the security element that is being improved in the usefulness of digital ID?
A great point. I think one of the most important values that is amplified by KERI and ACDCs, and thus the Veridian platform, is the ability to have one identifier, globally interoperable, for the lifetime of the individual or the organization. This is one of the fundamental reasons it was adopted by financial institutions. What we see typically in the digital identity space, because it leverages cryptography, we see people identifying themselves using public keys. And this is a useful methodology, except when you have to change the keys, you no longer have an attachment to your identifier because your public key is what you were using to identify yourself. Now, there are systems that will create an identifier and bind it to that public key. But the weakness there is that binding, how it actually maintains the record to the public key. And this is typically done with certificates. But the binding between the identifier in KERI, the controller of the keys, and the cryptographic keys, the most robust cryptographically secure identity protocol that we are aware of. And we have been studying these protocols for numerous years, attending numerous industry events and conferences. And also, I have studied this from an academic perspective for the last 4 years.
And then just to drill on that deeper, how does this compare to other major identity standards and offerings that exist today?
The biggest difference, I would say, how it compares to other standards, is we offer a future-proof design, meaning we can recover from a quantum event or a key compromise event in real time, because as I mentioned, we have these key event logs, but we also have a plethora of services and infrastructure. And that is the key here. Digital identity is not just about an application and a database. It is about a whole series of services and infrastructure that are required to ensure that you have the fully robust identity system that you can achieve today with Veridian. But those key event logs can be audited and observed by a service called a watcher. And the minute something happens with that identifier, keys are rotated, credentials are issued to it, or a signature is created on some kind of engagement. Let's say it's a contract perhaps that was signed. Your watcher, which is deployed by yourself, it can be deployed anonymously, it can be deployed in numerous numbers, geographically dispersed, and it will inform you straight to your mobile device that something is happening with your key event log. This allows you, as the authentic controller of the identity, to either verify that the activity is actually not suspicious, or as the controller, it gives you this opportunity now to immediately rotate out the controlling keys of the identifier and rotate in the previously rotated keys. And this pre-rotation is the key to how we are future-proof. If I can drill a little bit deeper, Jeremy, what the difference here is, with quantum attacks specifically, the risk here is any knowledge of a public key when passed to a quantum computer that is capable of breaking the cryptographic algorithm, it can produce the private key. And this is where the challenge arises. Because if we are using public keys as they are designed to be publicly and share them, then it is fairly easy to collect a repository of all of the known public keys. And once you have a powerful enough quantum computer, you can provide all of these public keys to the mechanism, and it can now break the cryptographic algorithms and provide the secure, what should be secret, private key. With pre-rotation, when we create an identifier in KERI, we create and establish the controlling keys for the identifier in its current state. And we also create the keys that are going to be next used, or they are pre-rotated. We never publish that public key. We only publish a hash of that second public key. And because a hash, a one-way hash function, cannot be compromised by a quantum computer, it gives us not only protection of being able to discover the public key and resist a quantum attack, even if the algorithm itself is not quantum proof, but it also gives you a mechanism to prove to the rest of the world that you are the authentic owner of the identifier because you actually have the public and private key pair that hash was derived from. But you can rotate out the control of the current keys as soon as you are aware that it's been compromised, which removes the power from the quantum computer or the attacker that has now breached your identity. And it gives you a timeline to then rotate in a quantum-proof algorithm, which is another one of these key factors behind KERI that is so different. It is not dependent on one specific type of cryptographic algorithm. You have the freedom to evolve the cryptography to whatever you see fit. So organizations today can prepare for quantum events without having to spend extensive amounts of money and research onto these post-quantum algorithms, enhance the computational resources necessary to utilize these algorithms, and change their systems fundamentally without knowing when this quantum event will happen. So we are providing a solution to become future-proof, to be quantum ready, quantum resistant, with minimal efforts, but ensure a certain amount of security for your organization until there comes a time when this quantum event happens. And I think this is an extremely powerful mechanism, and it is something that we do not see across other identity systems today. Also, one of the extremely important factors of, again, why it is leveraged in the financial markets. And I should probably mention that the governing body here is the Global Legal Entity Identifier Foundation. And this is the governing body that provides identities to this financial sector, where we first heard about KERI and ACDCs. But I think I should pause here, Jeremy, before I go deeper down the rabbit hole and pass back to you, perhaps if you have any questions about that or another question you'd like to ask.
You bring up very interesting points surrounding KERI ACDC. And many of this points to the fact that it appears that the security module surrounding this identity protocol is very distinct in the industry. One point, Thomas, that we discussed previously was that the public key is not the identifier. And this is normally the definition of how you implement digital identity. And so what actually is this identifier if not the public key, and why is that an advantage?
That's a great point, Jeremy. You're right. We did speak about the public key, private key relationship, and also that binding between potentially an identifier and a public key pair, which is typically done by a certificate. But it's that binding where the weakness exists. It's that ability to compromise the certificate issuer, and then you can now misrepresent the controlling key pair of the identifier. With KERI, we have autonomic identifiers. This means the binding between the identifier, the controller, and the controlling key pair are cryptographically sound. It also ensures that not only identifiers, but the credentials are verified and established in a completely different way than other digital identity systems. With ACDCs, authentic chained data containers, verification isn't static. And what I mean by this is in current platforms and protocols today, when a credential is created, it is signed by the issuer and signed by the receiver, and that data signature is embedded into the credential. And the verification process of that credential is to just look at the digital signature and say, yes, this was signed by the private key that represents the public key listed in the credential. And yes, this has been presented by the owner who signed it with their private key, and the public key that corresponds to it is also anchored inside the credential. In KERI, we don't sign credentials in that way. What we do, we go back to that key event log. We take all of that data that exists in the credential and we hash that data. And we embed that data into the key event log of the recipient. And we also embed that data into the key event log of the issuer. When I go to present that credential to a verifying body, they don't look at digital signatures on the credential because there aren't any on the credential. What they will do is they will take this data signature that I present to them. They will look up in my key event log, has this been signed and presented to me today with the current controlling keys of the identifier, not perhaps keys that we leveraged years ago and have now potentially become compromised, but actually validate that this has been presented with the current controlling key pairs. It will validate that the information presented to them is exactly same as the hash data that is logged inside the key event log cryptographically. And then it will also match with the key event log of the issuer to ensure that that exact same data set exists in their key event log. And this process allows you to have digital signatures that are bound to the current key state. Or rather, you can say they are unbounded from the current key state. I need to say that again, sorry. What this gives you is digital signatures that are not bound to the key state at the time of issuance of those credentials. It gives you a mechanism to not only verify that the current keys that are in control of the identifier have been used to present the credential, but it also gives you a very unique mechanism when it comes to the credentials themselves. I don't need to revoke any credentials if I change my key pair. And this is very common today in many systems. If I change my keys, I have to revoke all the credentials I've issued, reissue them again to the owner, and then continue on with operation. We eliminate all of that with KERI and ACDCs. That's extremely efficient, it's extremely cost effective, and it is one of the most powerful features of KERI and ACDC when it comes to verification and credentials.
That's amazing. Now, there's another topic I'd like to touch on briefly, which is the role of chained credentials and what happens now when we look at building out applications. Commonly in the past recent months, the term reusable identity has been gaining traction in the market. But we are also concerned with organizational identity and the ability for an enterprise or an organization to deploy their own trusted digital identity ecosystem. And so how does both then reusable identity and organizational, how does Veridian support these two verticals?
Jeremy, I can tell you've been reading up about ACDCs. The chaining factor behind these verifiable data formats is also extremely powerful. I would say that is equally as powerful as the verification methods that I mentioned before and how they are different. But with a blockchain, we understand the value of having a cryptographically chained structure. And if we think back to the first blockchain, the most prominent blockchain that has run the longest to date, not the second longest, which is Cardano, but the first longest, which is the Bitcoin network, what that blockchain forms is what's called a directed acyclic graph, or DAG. And this is this chained cryptographic structure. When we anchor a block onto the previous block, we are forming a consensus of everything that has happened prior, and we are assuring the validity of that block that we have anchored on. You are creating that exact same cryptographic structure with ACDCs. You have the ability to chain these credentials to one another. When we talk about organizational identity, this can be defined as the ability to verify your identity and data beyond the walls of your organization or your ecosystem. And this is where it becomes fundamentally important, the interoperability piece. Your legal entity identifier of an organization is fundamental to business. And it is used when you are requesting a loan or a bank account, when you are seeking to employ a vendor, or you are going through some kind of commercial compliance, for example. But what we can do today with Veridian and leveraging either a legal entity identifier that comes from that root of trust I mentioned before, GLIFE, Global Legal Entity Identifier Foundation, or with Veridian, you can establish your own root of trust for your organization or industry, leveraging the exact same proven technology and a similar governance framework if you would like. But what you can do as an organization is you can form a legal entity identifier, and then you can actually chain credentials down from that root of trust to the employees of the company, to the machines on the factory floor of that company, into the products that company ships. And you now have that same verifiable trust that you can establish in a blockchain, the same way you can in the operations of your organization. And this allows you to start moving into leveraging verifiable credentials in workflows and use cases and starting to try and solve some of those challenges I mentioned in the beginning when it comes to data breaches, key compromises. If you can eliminate the need for usernames, passwords, secret recovery phrases, one-time passwords being sent to a cell phone, which are all things that are compromised almost daily, then you're already moving in the right direction. And if that identity and that authority behind that credential is securely anchored all the way to the root of trust of the organization, then there's not a better solution available today. In addition, if you're leveraging KERI, you're using a protocol-based approach, and you can now speak pure protocol to your other parties. So you can run Veridian in your own infrastructure, and you can communicate with Veridian being run in another organization's infrastructure across a highly secure peer-to-peer channel without the need for a centralized service system, provider, or platform. But even better, because we realize there's a reality here that maybe I don't want to run the infrastructure. Maybe I'm a small business and I don't have the technical capabilities, but I want to ensure the security footprint of my organization. You can now, with Veridian, leverage a sovereign secure Veridian service provider. And this is another one of these key differentiators. Although you have a service provider providing you with your identity services, the keys controlling all of that data, all of those identities, still decentralized. They still sit with the owners of the organization, with the employees on their mobile device, or in the computers of the employees, or on the machine shop floor. So it is a game changer, so to speak, when it comes to digital identity, verifiable data, organizational identity, and the ability to have interoperability across ecosystems ubiquitously.
Thomas, you're bringing up great points on the role of decentralized technologies and the power of KERI ACDC. There are three elements that I would like to touch upon. And the first one, I believe, is the question on everyone's mind, which is, okay, now how does blockchain make an improvement to KERI ACDCs as part of Veridian?
You're on fire, Jeremy. Another great question. And I think this is actually perhaps some context I should have provided earlier. As we mentioned, one of our objectives, or one of our main objectives, was to encourage enterprise adoption. And there's a reality here that many enterprises and organizations perhaps don't have a level of comfort utilizing Web3 tech and blockchain. And what we wanted was for Veridian to be adoptable without hard requirements for blockchain. Because our strategy here is build up the confidence in the technology and slowly start iterating in the innovation. So what you can do with Veridian today, if you choose to do so, is you can actually choose not to leverage the blockchain. And I know that sounds controversial. We encourage it. We provide many benefits to leverage it. We've also gone through an extensive process from not only security and penetration testing, but also from a legal perspective. Because another one of these concerns we hear from enterprise and industry is data privacy. These regulations such as GDPR, European Union. And how can I put all of this data on a blockchain and I can't delete it? Therefore, I can't respond to a deletion request. So the way we've designed Veridian is to not put any of this PII data on chain. So if you want to use Veridian, you can do so in a purely cloud infrastructure, mobile application use case. But you can also leverage a tertiary root of trust. So in the cloud, you have a secondary root of trust. On your mobile device, you have your primary root of trust. And on the blockchain, you have your tertiary root of trust. And why you would want to do this? If you anchor verifiability of your decentralized identity onto the Cardano blockchain, you can now, within the Cardano ecosystem, ensure the same levels of identity assurance you can outside the blockchain, but you can integrate this into decentralized applications, as we've done for Cardano Ballot. You can integrate it into native assets, as we've done with our partners Guild One, and you can integrate it into smart contracts, creating verifiable smart contracts. And this is also a game changer when it comes to Web3. No longer the execution of a smart contract is fundamentally dependent on the financial keys associated with it, but you can now add in an additional compliance verification layer to a smart contract. So in order to execute contract A, you not only need to provide keys B and C, but also proof of verifiable identity D in order to execute it. It's another game changer in the Web3 space. And this is becoming more and more attractive for a number of different use cases, spanning across different Web3 networks.
Yes, I mean, what this is enabling is digital identity as infrastructure and not a solution that you must buy from this particular vendor. It's what can be accessed by any organization in multiple ways.
Absolutely.
I wanted to go back then to this tertiary root of trust, and specifically what this means today in the lightweight model of using Cardano is that what we're able to do is to take the key event log history itself and store that on Cardano. Therefore, we reduce the ability for someone to manipulate access to that key event log. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. And we do it in a GDPR compliant way, which is one of these key factors. You can think of that tertiary root of trust or that key event log verifiable data that is now on chain also being able to interop with that watcher service I mentioned before. So no longer do you have a watcher that is just looking at what's happening in the cloud, but you also have a global watcher that's able to look at as many instances of KERI identifiers as you wish. And now you start creating decentralized infrastructure that can ensure levels of verifiability and insurance that can't be achieved today by any other platform or protocol.
And what type of market issues then does this solve?
I mean, the sky is the limit. And sometimes this is the challenge, knowing where to focus in the efforts, especially in these early days of innovative technology. For us, what we think is most fundamental is aligning with market needs. So we can start talking about supply chain and how every single interaction within a value chain can be end verifiable. This allows us to provide technology that supports this oncoming initiative of digital product passports. We can look at compliance, a very old, traditional workflow, heavily paper-based, highly fraught with fraud, and concerns around where your data lives and for how long. We can make electronic, reusable KYC, KYB, and we can leverage KERI and ACDCs to do so in an extremely powerful way. But let's keep drilling down, shall we? We can remove usernames, passwords, like I mentioned before, and we can have passwordless authentication. We can have access passes to events that no longer rely on a QR code that anybody can take a picture of and share with one another. We can create cryptographically verifiable credentials that you can present to enter a facility, like we did this year with our team offsite, the Cardano Foundation. We are trying to find the most impactful verticals to demonstrate this technology. There are initiatives happening in the United States around digital identity that align extremely well with our technology. There are stablecoin assets that require industry-level compliance. We have an identifier and a protocol that not only has an ISO standard behind it, but also has a root of trust in Glyph, again, this financial institutional use case, with regulatory oversight commission involvement that can provide a level of assurance and compliance to a stablecoin that doesn't exist today. And the fact that you can automate these processes, make them reusable, they are cost-saving, they are efficient, and they are a game changer in a number of different industries. I hope I answered that question comprehensively enough for you, but the sky is the limit. And this is why we have sandbox infrastructure available. And we are welcoming any and all to get involved in Veridian, demonstrate their use cases, and start leveraging this open source technology.
And specifically for the Cardano community, one very interesting use case with Veridian is actually looking into DAO tooling. Many organizations have expressed their interest in a DAO for what it can do for decentralized governance and voting. And our solution is a transaction fee-free voting solution that ties this vote to the identity of the person itself in a privacy-preserving way.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Privacy preservation and cryptographic comprehensiveness, the fundamental pillars of Veridian platform. We aren't future-proof if we don't have this cryptographic comprehensive element behind us.
Now, Thomas, there are two more points that I'd really like to dive into quickly. And the first one is, what is the role of self-sovereign identity in the system? Is this something that enterprises really need in order to develop a robust identity platform?
I think there's a thought here to be considered between a need and a want. But to your initial point, self-sovereign, regardless of identity, self-sovereign is a movement we are seeing across a number of technologies. As it pertains to self-sovereign identity, the key factor here is I control my identity, no one else. People can make attestations about my identity. So Thomas has the right to attend this conference. Thomas has this degree and went to this academic institution. But Thomas is controlled by me, not by a big tech company, not by a platform that I log into with my email and my password. Because guess what? If somebody can get into my email, then they can reset my platform access and they can control my identity. It is truly decentralized. It is truly self-sovereign, but it also comes with what is necessary for everyday life. So when we forget our password, we click on a button that says, I forgot my password. Leveraging multi-signature identifiers and credentials allow you as an administrator to provide this support to your clients or to your users or to your citizens. Because remember, we have an extremely scalable solution here that is suitable for hundreds of thousands, millions of users. One of the primary reasons that is because the way that we are encoding data is far more efficient than the other platforms and protocols you see today. We don't leverage JSON and all the different flavors of JSON encoding. We have a very unique encoding mechanism, and I'm happy to drill down into that if you'd like to. But self-sovereign, as it pertains to organizations, allows an organization to no longer be reliant on big tech. They can control their data. They can take ownership of their IP and ensure they know exactly what is happening with their data integrity. But they can also have the user experience and the seamless integration that you expect from big tech.
Yeah, and data protection annually is the leading topic that's trending when it comes to cybersecurity. And like the sophistication for hackers is only increasing at an exponential rate. And so I very much see the value here in what KERI ACDC provides for self-sovereign identity and for automating these threat detections to maintain that level of security that's critical for businesses to operate.
And I think there's one point here that I should make. You can leverage KERI and ACDCs to create highly secure interoperability across existing systems. We are well aware that an organization is not going to want to rip out the tech they're using and replace it because they need to keep operations going. They need to keep revenues coming in, and they need to make sure that they can maintain the reputation and the service level agreements that they have. What you can do with KERI and ACDCs is you can take unique formats, protocols, data structures. You can demap them into an ACDC because an ACDC isn't just a verifiable credential, which you get in other platforms. And there are many different types of them. ACDCs are exactly what they say they are. They are authentic, chained data containers. You can put any arbitrary data into an ACDC. You can commute that across a highly secure peer-to-peer channel to your partner in a highly verifiable way, and they can then demap that down to be interpreted by their systems. So from an organizational and an international trade perspective, we don't all have to be using a three-lettered service provider or a highly expensive e-commerce solution, especially if I'm a small mom and pop. If I'm a small independent business owner, I can't afford some of this technology that is being leveraged by the big Fortune 500s. But I can implement Veridian. I can have an interoperable communication with a large company and organization, and I can still interpret that in my systems without having to replace everything. And I think
Wow.
that's a key point to mention here.
Thank you, Thomas. Veridian is the first open source mobile wallet for KERI ACDC. Now, why is this such a milestone to be celebrated in the world of digital identity? And is mobile the missing piece for enterprises to truly unlock the values of digital ID or digital identity systems?
When we came into the digital identity space, and when I say we, I mean the Cardano Foundation and the team that I have the privilege of leading here at the Cardano Foundation. When we came into the digital identity space, the resounding narrative was KERI, Key Event Receipt Infrastructure, is an impressive cryptographic decentralized key management protocol. It's extremely difficult. It's extremely hard to understand how I take this and implement it. So one of the challenges that appealed to us was, hey, this is difficult to do. People aren't doing it. At the Cardano Foundation, we are extremely research and academic focused. Sometimes we get accused of being late to the game or slow, but when we get there, we know what we're doing. That is the case with Veridian. We've arrived and we know what we're doing with digital identity. So the mobile wallet not only unlocks the usability of KERI, but it enhances the utility behind the identities and the verifiable data structures, the associated with those identities. So in a very secure and seamless way, I can integrate my mobile wallet into a web-based session or into the back end of a system. And again, a highly secure peer-to-peer channel. And now I can leverage all of this secure verifiable identity in my systems and in my workflows. And that is fundamental to what the mobile wallet unlocks from an organizational perspective. But it also allows you as an organization to leverage a white label solution. So you don't have to present your employees or your customers with something that comes from Veridian. You can present to them a completely bespoke, customized white label solution that perhaps only has the features that you need for your organization and your clients. It is truly flexible. It is truly comprehensive, and it is designed to service the needs of industry.
So Veridian is much more than just the mobile wallet. It's a robust identity platform that can serve as the backbone for security and application development across the digital identity landscape. What excites you the most as the visionary and leader behind Veridian? What excites you the most for market adoption?
You're 100% right, Jeremy. Veridian is not just about the Veridian wallet. It is about the credential management services, the cloud infrastructure, the auditing and monitoring and real-time notification services that are provided by the infrastructure. But what excites me the most about Veridian is the interest we are receiving from industries that we never had talking to blockchain foundations in the past. We are seeing a significant understanding of a need to change digital identity. We are seeing regulations rolling out across countries and geographical regions, some in the European Union, some across the United States, others in Asian markets. Slowly, what is beginning to occur is people are realizing that, again, these digital identity regulations are still somewhat siloed into those geographical regions. So I may adopt a European standard for digital identity, but it doesn't give me any interoperability with my suppliers in Asia, which is another reason why Veridian is so appealing at a global scale. And I think that's what I find most intriguing. most exciting is we have landed on a truly global, interoperable solution that you can be confident in choosing and knowing you will not need to rebuild your systems. You can prepare for a quantum event today, and you can ensure recovery from compromise attacks in the future, as well as the moment they occur. We're never going to be able to prevent attacks. We should be able to recover from them immediately. And maybe I leave here with one kind of quote, perhaps, or statistic that has been recently published by IBM. On average, it takes an organization more than 250 days to identify an attack has happened and to resolve it. With Veridian, that period of time is less than a minute. It can be less than a second, depending on your security profile.
Incredible. Thank you, Thomas. This has been a very engaging and insightful conversation. How is it if someone is interested in testing Veridian or reaching out to the team, how do they contact us?
That's very important, Jeremy. Thank you for reminding me. We have a fantastic website at the CardanoFoundation.org. We've also got an independent website for Veridian, veridian.id. You can reach the team via email at identitysolutions@veridian.id. You can also reach us on LinkedIn across our numerous pages that we have there available. If you want to test out Veridian, the platform, the infrastructure, the mobile applications that you can download from the Android and iOS stores today, you can also reach out to us and request a sandbox, and we'll provide you with free access to the sandbox to experiment with. This sandbox environment is running on a multi-tenant bare metal implementation that we have, so it costs us hardly anything, and we are happy to offer this infrastructure for testing purposes. If you have an active project, pilot, POC that you would like to explore with the team, then we can also set up a meeting with you and discuss these further. But thank you, Jeremy, very much for giving me the opportunity to speak today about Veridian. And I hope I have the opportunity to come back to talk more about Veridian, the latest versions we are going to be releasing, as well as some of the very interesting business cases, partnerships, and pilots that we are currently underway with today.
Yes, I definitely want to have a follow-up where we can do a deeper dive into what Glyph is, the role of LEI, and the role of VLEI.
I think that's a fantastic idea.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. If you'd like to join in on the discussion, comment below on any of our public social media platforms.
Thank you for joining us on Let's Talk Cardano. For more insights and deep dives into the world of blockchain, don't forget to subscribe and reach us at CardanoFoundation.org, where you'll find extra resources and content on all things blockchain. Leave us a review wherever you enjoy podcasts. Follow us on social media and stay tuned for more coming soon.